Hello and welcome to Irish Science Fiction. My name is Brian Sexton and you are about to listen to, if you hang around, chapter 48 of a story called Nancy Goodame, the Space Ranger. So, and a daw is a tree and away we go. Will I deploy the Appledon for law indicators? Asked European Space Agency Mission Specialist Bart McMorrow. What? Asked European Space Agency Mission Specialist Nancy McGinley. Will I deploy the Appledon for law indicators? Asked Bart. What Appledon for law indicators? I don't know, I was hoping you'd tell me where they were. Nancy didn't know where they were, or even if they existed in a Kalomp. All she knew was that the Kalomp was taking heavy fire from an approaching rocket ship, and there was not much she could do about it. Now, it's probably worth explaining what brought Bart and Nancy to this point in the story, which was a vehicle known as a Kalomp. They had boarded it at the Jupiterian city of Hobblegraniker and had planned to use it to travel to a collection of statues which had been constructed in the Sea of Uncertainty beyond the harbour entrance to the Jupiterian seaside settlement of Claspabron. Their plan was to locate, retrieve and return a publication known as the Book of Bongerlon to Hobblegraniker and a wizard known as Bart Zungelmeyer. Using the Kalomp had been his idea. The wizard promised that he would reward their efforts with assistance in finding several European Space Agency colleagues. Nancy believed this would be an essential step towards their eventual return to planet Earth. Bart didn't really have anything else to do. Why do you reckon they're shooting at us? Asked Bart. He asked the question in response to a series of loud explosions close to the rear of their vehicle. I don't know, must be more Sozniacks. They haven't got great aim, noted Bart. Those explosions haven't even scuffed the Watsits, you know, the big roundy thing, or the gimbally yokes on the underside. The Watsits Bart was referring to were two large heavy wings extending either side of the vehicle. The big roundy thing was some sort of a balloon that formed the top of the vehicle, and the gimbally yokes were 6 metallic grappling hook shaped arms that reached out in all directions from the box shaped compartment he was occupying with Nancy. If they had been on Earth, Bart would have probably described it as a balloon shaped dirigible with wings. Or a giant flying winged octopus. I don't think those explosions are meant to do damage, said Nancy. Then what's the point? To get us to slow or stop. Then speed up and keep going. I'm trying to, said Nancy. And she was. She had been successfully operating the Kalomp since shortly after the end of chapter 46. The wizard, known as Bart Zungelmeyer, had guided herself and Bart from the third calcified layer of the city upwards through a confusing jumble of streets and passageways until they arrived at a large flat ledge containing 7 battered balloon-shaped vehicles. The ledge extended in a semicircle above a canyon lined with layers and layers of built environment. The ledge was the size of a football field and each vehicle was about 20 metres in length, had 2 large fabric and metal wings and a cabin with large windows on each of its 4 walls and 6 grappling arms attached to anchors which seemed to be preventing the vehicles from moving. Access to the inside of the cabin was through an open window. Bart correctly assumed Nancy would be able to operate the Kalomp and pointed to a seat facing an array of levers beside one of the windows. There you go now, he said. Don't worry about finding me when you get back. I'll get the wind to guide you in close to the Appledon chamber. There'll be food ready for when you get in. Nancy sat into the seat facing the levers. Bart poked around the large 15 by 10 metre cabin and Zork jumped back out of the open window and closed it behind him. Nancy thought about moving and almost instinctively her hands reached for 2 of the levers. The Kalomp shuddered, retracted the 6 grappling arms from the anchors and the Kalomp began to rise. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, but then faster and unmissably perceptibly. Nancy and Bart scanned every window as the vehicle rose above the city formerly known as Hobblegraniker. Below them was the large semicircular ledge with the 6 remaining Kalomps and the wizard known as Bart Zungelmeyer fading from view. The Kalomp rose through the air. Nancy could not tell how it was moving or what force was behind it, but she instinctively moved the levers and the vehicle responded. Soon they were above the city and its full extent was visible. It stretched for many miles in every direction, and the sky was busy with rocket ships moving to and from a dozen or so points in the city below. Soon they were high enough to see the curvature of the surface of the planet. The terrain, mountains and seas looked like irregular patchwork on a vast psychedelic blanket. It was enough to keep both Bart and Nancy in silence for some time. When Bart spoke, it was to ask 3 questions. Do you know where the toilet is on this thing? Are you sure you know where we're going? And, do you reckon that rocket ship behind us is following us? It has a sneaky look about it. Nancy's answers took the form of further questions. No. Is it a number 1 or number 2 you have to do? If it's a number 1, then just go out one of the windows. No, I have no idea where we're going. I'm just going by instinct. What rocket ship? How can a rocket ship look sneaky? Bart didn't get a chance to reply as a volley of explosions rattled the Kalomp. "That rocket ship is firing at us," he said. He then walked to a window at the rear of the Kalomp, which was the opposite end to where Nancy was seated and operating the levers, and yelled, "Piss off!" He then urinated out of the window in the approximate direction of the rocket. The rocket replied with a volley of 6 shots. Bart replied to the volley by showing them his middle finger and saying, "We better land, Nancy. They're going to hit us with one of those shots sooner or later." Bart's mind then turned to Uppledon for indicators. Nancy released the controls and the Kalomp stopped rattling and whirring. She then stood up, unholstered a crossbow, loaded a bolt, and hid the crossbow under her seat. The rocket was now clearly visible. It turned until the large metallic cylindrical body was alongside the Kalomp. Both vehicles seemed to be floating in midair with no obvious indications of their method of propulsion. "You have to hand it to the Jupiterians. They might all be a bunch of flutes, but they know how to build space rockets, and whatever the thing we're in is," noted Bart. He then stuck his hand and middle finger out the window towards the rocket. A hatch opened at the side of the rocket, and a long metal walkway extended out of the base of the hatch towards the open rear window of the Kalomp, where Bart was standing. Crunch! Bart ran to the opposite end of the cabin to where Nancy was standing next to the seat and levers. The impact of the gangway with the rear of the Kalomp broke a hole large enough for 2 uniformed Jupiterians to clamber 5 metres from the rocket to the Kalomp and towards the cabin. "They're boarding," said Bart. "There's a fat lad already got one of his feet in the back of the cabin. Will I kick him in the nuts?" "No," said Nancy. "If they wanted to harm us, they would have done so already. Leave them be and see what they want." "The fat lad's in the cabin now, and there's another buck behind him with a clipboard. They look like a pair of knobs. Are you sure we shouldn't be hitting them with slaps, kicks and headbutts?" Cold wind whistled in from where the boarding plank had broken into the rear of the cabin. Bart had walked halfway down the 15-metre length of the cabin and faced 2 male uniformed Sozniaks, who were standing and looking around grumpily at the interior of the cabin. He showed them his middle finger for a 3rd time and shouted, "What do ye want?" "Names!" shouted the smaller of the two. He held a clipboard and stood partly behind his colleague as he spoke. "Ye want names? OK, Lardarse and Goblin. The fat lad in front of you can be Lardarse." "We already have names," shouted the smaller clipboard-holding Sozniak. "Fair play to you. You came prepared, so. You're after breaking the back wall of this what's-it, so I'm guessing you want something. What do you want?" "We wouldn't have broken it if you had held to at the site of our patrol. Now, as my colleague Smuggleton asked, what are your names?" "Nancy McGinley and Bart McMurrow of the European Space Agency on Earth," said Nancy. She had walked as far as Bart and nudged him. "What?" he asked. "Let me talk to these," she whispered. "European Space Agency? Nah, I don't ever remember that, do you, Yankeldow?" "No, Smuggleton, I do not. And if I had, I would have added that to the list." "It's not on the list, Yankeldow." "I know. We need to add it." The smaller Sozniak, made to write on his clipboard, stopped and asked, "How do you spell European Space Agency, Yankeldow?" "I don't know. It doesn't matter. I'm hereby eliminating it from Jupiterian speech, so there's no need to record it." "But how do we know if it's eliminated, if there's no record of it, Yankeldow?" "Because it's not on the list, Smuggleton." "Oh, I see. We'll make a note of us not making a note, and then note it." Bart took several large steps towards the Sozniaks. "Lads, we need to do this somewhere else," he said. "Who are ye, anyway?" he asked. "Smuggleton Hunumfer and Yankeldow Barsticle of the Sozniack Department of Speech Efficiency," replied the larger of the 2 Sozniaks. "We are the Stasi," added the smaller clipboard-wielding Jupiterian. "We are tasked with monitoring citizens for the use of unnecessary idioms, so everyone can say more using less words, to help streamline communication and make the planet a more effective place for Sozman to rule." "Praise be to him in his unmeritorious wisdom," added the larger Sozniak. "Indeed," replied his colleague. I think you were wrong there, Smuggleton. Indeed is on the list, so it is prohibited." "Indeed it is, Yankeldow. Yes, it is, Yankeldow. My mistake." "So, Nancy and Bart of the name redacted and not added to the list of prescribed speech," said the larger Sozniak. "Why would you be elevated above the land in a Kalomp if not to speak and use words that are prohibited?" Yankeldow, the word Kalomp is prescribed." "Yeah, we removed it yesterday, do you remember? Just there now we had to radio control and tell them we were in pursuit of an aerial vehicle of moderate age because we couldn't describe it." "Right, well, then fine. Where was I?" "Interrogating the occupants of the thing we can no longer describe, Yankeldow." "And so I was, Smuggleton. So I was." "No language repetition, Yankeldow. I'm sorry to cut across you, but it's just one of the 5 primary rules of speech outlined by the Stasi Charter." "Oh, you are right, Smuggleton. Efficiency is the aim and repetition is the enemy of efficiency." "Lads," interrupted Bart, "why don't you just shut your faces?" Nancy nudged Bart for a second time. "Quiet, Bart. Maybe they can give us directions." She said, "Do either of you know where Claspa Broen is?" I do, said the larger Sozniack. Me too, said his colleague. Could you tell us how to get there? Asked Nancy. Yes. You would need to head 18 bolonicals starwards, and it would be below you, directly in a while, said the larger Sozniack. Bart from Name Redacted has a point though, Yankeldo. We could just keep quiet. That would be a very efficient use of language. That is why you suggested it, isn't it, Bart from Name Redacted? Arse, noted Bart. Your friend is very astute, Nancy, said the larger Jupiterian. Make a note at the top of the list, Smiggleton. I, Yankeldo Barsticle, Level 2 Speech Moderator of the Sozniack Department of Speech Efficiency, also known as the Stasi, hereby decree that the best and most efficient use of language is to withhold all words and say nothing. The smaller Jupiterian made a note in his clipboard and said, Duly noted, Yankeldo. Both Jupiterians stood in silence. The larger one shrugged and pointed his thumb behind him. The smaller clipboard-holding Sozniack tapped him on the shoulder. He looked round and both shrugged. They nodded towards the large metal cylindrical space rocket at the end of the 5-metre gangway behind them. Bart looked to Nancy and made to speak, but she shook her head. Both Jupiterians nodded approvingly, turned, clambered out of the broken rear wall/window of the Kalomp's cabin, and back into their space rocket. 18 bolonicals starwards, for exactly a while, noted Bart. How long do you reckon that is, Nancy? I don't think that helps us at all. The cabin shuddered as the Sozniack rocket retracted the metal walkway and changed direction before slowly retreating. Do you reckon those lads were the full shilling? Asked Bart. That fat lad seemed sound, but the skinny one was away with the fairies, he answered to his own questions. So what now, Nancy? I suppose we keep looking. Would you know those statues if you saw them? Ah, yeah, big tall stone replicas of a goofy-looking man doing nothing in particular. Nancy retrieved, disarmed and holstered her crossbow. She thought about heading towards a blue patch in the distant terrain below, and her hands, the levers and the Kalomp itself seemed to follow naturally. Was it a number 1 or number 2 you had to take back there? Just a piss, said Bart. The Kalomp shook gently as it dropped in altitude. The margins between terrain, mountains and seas became clearer. Nancy's instincts, her hands and the Kalomp moved towards a large area of blue. Don't worry, I washed my hands, added Bart. No, you didn't. Well, I thought about it, said Bart. And it's the thought that counts. Just keep an eye out the window for those statues. I'm going to start taking this thing over the coast of whatever water bodies we find. And that was it for the late afternoon on the 9th day of the first human expedition to another planet. A holstered crossbow. A silent Sozniack Department of Speech Efficiency team. Urine. European Space Agency Mission Specialist Nancy Goodame McGinley. European Space Agency Mission Specialist Bart McMorrow. An underground army of sorts. An elderly former tunnel-digging recruit to the Hoblegraniker Defence League. An opera dome chamber with 2 dining elderly Jupiterians. Muppeldorf. A Kalomp. And the last remaining copy of the Book of Bongerlon, adrift on the Sea of Uncertainty on Jupiter. Alright, thank you very much if you listened to that. Fair play to you. There's what now? There's 8 to go and the story will finish up. And if you've been following all along, thanks very much and chat to you in 2 weeks hopefully. Cheers.